Who took the red diamond? In the heart of the city, inside the Grand City Museum, a treasure waited. It was a diamond so beautiful and rare that it had its own name, the Fire Heart. This is the story of an impossible crime, and how a clever detective had to solve a mystery that had no clues, no witnesses, and no way in or out. The museum was a grand building, with tall white columns and quiet, echoing halls. In the very center of the largest hall, the diamond sat alone. It was the size of a bird's egg, and its color was a deep, fiery red, like the last moments of a perfect sunset. It rested on a soft black cushion inside a case made of thick, shining glass. For 100 years, kings and queens had owned this diamond. Now it belonged to the city, a priceless treasure for everyone to see. The museum director, Mr. Blackwood, loved the diamond more than anything. One afternoon, he stood beside the case, talking to a news reporter. He was a small man who always seemed nervous, but when he spoke about the museum, his voice was full of pride. "This diamond is perfectly safe," he told the reporter, polishing the glass case with a cloth. "This room has only one door, and it is made of solid steel. The glass case is unbreakable. It is impossible to steal." He smiled, but his eyes moved quickly around the room, as if he was always looking for danger. That night the museum grew dark and silent. The only person inside was Leo, the night security guard. Leo was a quiet man with a kind face. He walked the long halls, his footsteps the only sound. He checked the paintings, the old statues, and the ancient pots. His job was to keep everything safe until the morning. The sun began to rise, sending soft yellow light through the museum's high windows. Leo started his final walk of the night. He walked into the grand hall to check on the diamond. He walked towards the center of the room. Then he stopped. His eyes opened wide with fear. The spot where the diamond should be was empty. The black cushion was there, but the beautiful red diamond was gone. Leo dropped his heavy flashlight. The sound of the drop of his flashlight was loud in the empty hall. "Who took the red diamond?" he shouted. Soon the museum was filled with police officers. But at the center of the chaos was one calm man, Detective Miller. He was not a big man, but he had eyes that missed nothing. He stood in the middle of the grand hall and looked around slowly. The room was a perfect puzzle. The single steel door was still locked from the inside. The large windows were sealed shut. They had not been opened in 50 years. There were no broken locks, no broken glass. Detective Miller checked the security cameras. The video showed nothing. For exactly 5 minutes during the night at 2:00 a.m., the video had gone completely black. After those 5 minutes, the camera was working again, but the diamond was already gone. Detective Miller looked at the empty case and the locked door. He turned to the worried Mr. Blackwood, whose face was pale with shock. "The diamond did not just disappear," Detective Miller said, his voice calm and steady. "A ghost did not take it. Someone was here, but how did they get in and out?" Detective Miller set up a temporary office in a small room inside the museum. One by one, he called in the 3 people who were closest to the crime. They were his only suspects. First came Mr. Blackwood, the museum director. He could not sit still. He walked around the small office, touching the books on the shelves and looking out the window. He wiped sweat from his face with a handkerchief, even though the room was cool. "The museum needs money, Detective," Mr. Blackwood said, his voice shaking a little. "We have big money problems. The roof needs to be fixed. We need better lights, but I would never steal. This museum is my life. I would protect the diamond with my own hands." Detective Miller listened patiently. His eyes moved to Mr. Blackwood's wrist. Mr. Blackwood was wearing a new watch. It was gold and silver, and it looked very, very expensive. Miller did not say anything about it. He just watched. Next was Ms. Dubois. She was a very rich woman who collected rare and beautiful things. She was the opposite of Mr. Blackwood. She was calm and elegant, dressed in a beautiful silk dress. She sat perfectly still in her chair and sipped a cup of tea that a police officer brought her. She did not seem worried at all. "Yes, I wanted that diamond," she said, her voice smooth like honey. She smiled a small, secret smile. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I offered Mr. Blackwood a lot of money for it. He said no, it's a shame it's gone." She looked down at her hands. Her fingernails were long and perfect, painted deep red, the same color as the missing diamond. Finally, Detective Miller spoke with Leo, the security guard. Leo looked sad and very tired. His shoulders were down, and he did not look the detective in the eye. He looked at his own shoes as he spoke. "I was on duty all night," he said, his voice low. "I walked the halls every hour. I heard nothing. I saw nothing. The museum was completely quiet." "What about the cameras?" Detective Miller asked gently. "They stopped working for 5 minutes. What happened then?" Leo looked down at his shoes again. He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know what happened," he finally whispered. "Maybe it was a problem with the electricity." He looked like a man carrying a heavy weight. After the interviews, Detective Miller went back to the crime scene. The grand hall was empty now. It was too clean. A good thief always leaves something behind, even something small. Miller knew he had to find it. He got down on his hands and knees and began to look inch by inch. He looked at the polished floor. He looked under the heavy benches along the walls. He looked everywhere. Most police officers were looking near the empty glass case, but Detective Miller walked to the far side of the room, near a tall white wall. He ran his hand along the bottom of the wall, and then he found something. It was not a footprint. It was not a fingerprint. It was a single tiny drop of blue paint. The tiny drop of blue paint was a strange clue. Detective Miller stood up and looked around the grand hall. The walls were all a clean, perfect white. They had been painted just last week, so where did the blue paint come from? He asked one of the museum workers, was any part of the museum painted blue? The worker thought for a moment. "Yes," he said, "the small art room next to this hall. It is being renovated. It's closed right now. We painted it a deep blue color yesterday." Detective Miller went to the small art room. The door was locked, but he had the key. Inside, the room was dark and dusty. Everything was covered in big white sheets. The air smelled strongly of fresh paint. The walls were a beautiful, deep blue. He walked carefully into the room, his footsteps quiet on the dusty floor. He looked around, searching for anything unusual. And then he saw it. Near one of the blue walls there was a small metal vent on the floor, and right beside the vent there was a tiny scratch in the wood. It was fresh. He knelt down and looked at the vent. It was an air vent, designed to move air from one room to another. This vent connected the blue art room directly to the grand hall where the diamond was, but the vent was very, very small. It was too small for a person. It was too small for a child. Detective Miller stood up and thought, the blue paint, the small vent, it didn't make sense. He decided to talk to his suspects again. He started with Mr. Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice still calm, "you told me the museum has money problems, but you are wearing a new, expensive watch." Mr. Blackwood's face turned red. He looked scared. I sold something," he said quickly. "A small painting from the museum's storage room. It was not important. I sold it to a private collector to get some money, but it was for the museum, to help pay the bills," he insisted. Detective Miller nodded slowly, but his eyes said that he did not believe the whole story. Next, the detective looked into Leo, the security guard. He made a phone call and learned something sad. Leo's young daughter was very sick. She needed an operation, a very expensive one. Leo did not have the money. He needed a lot of money, and he needed it fast. This was a strong reason to steal a diamond. Finally, Detective Miller decided to find Ms. Dubois. He did not go to her big, expensive mansion. Instead, his investigation led him to a small, secret auction house in a hidden part of the city. It was a quiet room, full of rich people bidding on art. Detective Miller stood in the back of the room, watching, and there in the front row was Ms. Dubois. She was holding up a small card, making a bid. She was trying to buy a painting. The auctioneer showed the painting to the room. It was a picture of a river under a starry sky. Detective Miller looked closely at the painting. His eyes grew wide. It was the unimportant painting that Mr. Blackwood said he sold. Why was Ms. Dubois buying it here, in a secret auction? Back in his small office, Detective Miller stood in front of a large board. On the board he had pinned pictures of his three suspects, Mr. Blackwood, Leo, and Ms. Dubois. He also pinned a photo of the small vent and a small card with a drop of blue paint on it. He drew lines connecting the pictures, trying to see the full story. The blue paint, he said quietly to himself. The small vent, the painting. Slowly the puzzle started to come together in his mind. He realized the theft was not just about the diamond. The diamond was a distraction. It was a bright, shiny object to make everyone look in one direction, while the real crime happened somewhere else. He called all three suspects and asked them to meet him in the grand hall. Mr. Blackwood, Leo, and Ms. Dubois stood together in the middle of the huge, empty room. The air was heavy with silence. They all watched the detective, waiting. "I know what happened," Detective Miller said calmly. His voice echoed in the hall. He looked directly at Mr. Blackwood. "You did not steal the diamond," he said, "but you lied to me. You did not sell one unimportant painting. You planned to switch the famous Starry River painting in this museum with a fake one. You planned to sell the real one to Ms. Dubois for a very large amount of money. The diamond theft was the perfect cover. While we were all looking for the diamond, you would switch the paintings." Mr. Blackwood's face was white. "No, that's not true," he shouted, but his voice was weak. Detective Miller then turned his calm eyes to Leo. "And you, Leo, you knew about this plan. Mr. Blackwood promised you money for your daughter's operation if you helped him. That is why you could not explain the 5 minutes of black video. You were going to turn off the cameras for him." Leo looked at the floor, his face full of shame. He did not say a word. Finally, Detective Miller looked at the elegant Ms. Dubois. "But the plan failed," he said. "It failed because someone else stole the diamond first. A real thief got here before you could." Everyone was confused. Mr. Blackwood and Ms. Dubois looked at each other. If they didn't take it, who did? Detective Miller slowly walked across the polished floor until he was standing next to the wall with the blue paint. He pointed down at the small vent near the floor. "The thief was not a person," he said, his voice low and serious. "The thief was small, the thief could fly, and the drop of blue paint was not from the thief. It was from the thief's nest." Mr. Blackwood, Ms. Dubois, and Leo stared at the detective. They were speechless. Fly, a nest, it made no sense. Detective Miller turned to Leo. "Leo, you work here every day. You walk these grounds every night. You know about the family of magpie birds that live in the big tree outside the art room window. Magpies are smart, black and white birds, and they love to steal shiny things." The detective explained his theory. One of the birds built its nest on the roof of the museum, right above the blue art room. While building its nest, it got a little blue paint on its feet. During the night, it flew into the art room through a window that was left open by the painters. It crawled through the small vent and into this hall. He pointed to the empty glass case in the center of the room. It saw the shiny red diamond. The glass case is strong, but it has a very small cleaning hole at the top, just big enough for a bird. The bird reached in with its beak, took the diamond, and flew back to its nest the same way it came. "The 5-minute camera blackout?" asked a police officer. "A coincidence," said Detective Miller. "A real power flicker. It had nothing to do with the theft." Everyone rushed outside. They stood on the green grass of the museum garden and looked up at the big old tree. High in the branches there was a messy nest made of sticks and leaves. And there in the middle of the nest was something red and sparkling in the morning sun. It was the fire heart diamond. The mystery was solved. Mr. Blackwood was arrested for his plan to sell the museum's famous painting. Ms. Dubois was also taken by the police to be questioned for her part in the plan. And Leo, Detective Miller saw the relief and sadness in his eyes. He had not stolen anything. He was only thinking about it because he was desperate to help his daughter. A local news station heard the story of the theft and of Leo's sick daughter. The people of the city were touched by his story. They started to donate money. Soon there was more than enough to pay for the operation. The final shot is of Detective Miller. Standing outside the museum later that day, he looked up at the magpie's nest and smiled a small smile. The real criminals were caught, the diamond was safe, and a little girl was going to get the help she needed. Sometimes the biggest mysteries have the smallest answers, and the real treasure is not a diamond, but the kindness of people. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, English Storyverse, and turn on notifications for more crime English stories that will help you learn English better.